Welcome to another session of Genealogy Quest. My name is Ken Goldsberry and I'm your host from the Larimer County Genealogical Society. I suggested our viewers have a pen and pad handy to take some notes from our speaker today. This program will be repeated throughout the month on this cable channel and also be available on our Society's website at www.lcgsco.org. Today our guest is Kathy Patrick, who is our Vice President for our Society, and she's been with us before and we're really happy to have her back. Today, Kathy will tell us about newspapers and obituaries and how important these records are for genealogists. She will tell us her personal family history story using newspapers and obituaries. And finally, I'll tell you about several exciting society events coming our way. Kathy, we really appreciate you being with us again.
Thank you.
And look forward to our discussion. I know you have lots of great information to share with us about newspapers and obituaries. And is there something that everyone should do when they look or research newspapers?
I think newspapers could be considered like the first draft of history. Sometimes the information in newspapers is not found anywhere else, especially in areas where maybe there were no, before vital records were even required by states. And newspapers will give us sort of an idea of the history that was going on during the time our ancestors were alive. It can give us what events were happening, even the cost of maybe buying food at the grocery store, or community events, in addition to the usual things that we think about, births, deaths, and marriages. There could be want ads. It's just amazing. Newspapers are absolutely fascinating to read. I start reading them even when I'm not even looking for something specific, just to read about the general era of what was happening in that small town or large city.
That's a good point, because people can find things to add to the story they're writing about to them. Very definitely. Well, there are thousands and thousands of newspapers, and how can people find out what's available?
Like you said, first we need to know what if a newspaper was even published for a certain town in a certain time frame. Probably the easiest way and the first way I would look at it is to go and look at the city directory. Most towns have a city directory. I'm originally from Green Bay, and they have city directories going back to the 1800s. And there you can find out what newspapers were even published at that point in time. Or you can just go to Cindy's List, which I think is an amazing resource, and look under newspapers, or start by looking at the specific state, county, and city that you're interested in. Some newspapers are archiving their not too distant features online, and for that you usually do have to pay something, but it's very reasonable.
I found out that city directories stopped being made, I think in 1922.
There was a couple of them. I know in Green Bay, like I said, where I'm from, I found them all the way through the 1950s.
Did you?
So it might depend on the area, which company. In Green Bay, it was made by a company named Wright, and maybe how large the area was.
But they can always check with a local library, and they'll let you know.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
Libraries, again, are another excellent resource.
Yes. You mentioned microfilmed newspapers, but what newspapers are on the internet?
Again, you could try going to if you know the name of the newspaper, go to their website and see if, again, like I said, they have archived any of their older issues. The local library, many of them have digitized some of the older newspapers, in addition to having the microfilms available at that particular library. There's some subscription sites. A lot of them let you go for maybe a 7 to 10 day free trial but you always have to give them your credit card information. And the big thing there is if you do it and you don't want to continue, make sure you cancel that order. I just recently did this myself. And they're not too happy about it, but it's a free trial, and it's like, hey, you didn't have what I was looking for, so be it. Some of them are newspaper archive. It's called newspapersarchive.com, rather. World Vital Records, and that's a really good one because it's available for free at the Family History Centers.
Well, you know, one thing that you brought out there, if you do try it on trial, don't forget to cancel it.
That's right.
You'll get billed from now on.
You will, and then it's really hard to get out of it.
Yeah. Well, are there indices to these newspapers, and how can we find those?
Again, indexing newspapers is very haphazard. Some libraries are doing that, and again, you can find that out by going to the library website and see if they have any indexes available. Or I think almost a better one is the local genealogical or historical society. Many of them are very involved in doing indexes of newspapers based on person's name, type of a community group involved. A Colorado example that I found that I think is absolutely amazing is Weld County. They have something called, and I want to get the name right here, it's called the Weld County Master Index. And it lists by last name, not only newspaper articles, but school records when they have children in the Weld County schools, land records. It's an amazing index for Weld County, and it's available online. And it'll tell you, a good index will tell you where the original record is found. So obviously you go there and look at it yourself. It's just a clue.
You know, you pointed out something there I think that is worth mentioning briefly. El Paso County in Colorado has something very similar that you can tune into that one and then go ahead and scan down and pick out deeds or obituaries or marriage license and so forth. It's fantastic.
That is.
And I'll bet many of the courthouses, the counties will be getting that.
Mm-hmm.
So it
I
should
think
be
it's coming. It's
yes.
just, it's very time consuming.
Newspaper be on there
Right.
also, yes. What are some of the types of things that you find in these older newspapers that you enjoy?
Births, obviously, the usual vital records that we think of, births, marriages, and deaths. And births, you always will get the name of the parents, maybe the name of the child, it might just be the sex of the child. Sometimes they'll give the name of the siblings. Marriages, I have a good example that you'll be seeing on the screen about an ancestor wedding from 1890. It happened to be a double wedding. A sister and a brother both got married, obviously the same day, and it goes into a lot of detail about where they were living, where they were going to honeymoon, who gave them the wedding reception, and with some further research I found out that was siblings of this sister and brother who also got married. Mm-hmm. And sometimes marriages in the newspapers will say, Mary was the youngest daughter of. So again, you have a little bit of birth order information you can get in that marriage notice. Obituaries, obviously, are in the newspapers. Funeral notices are usually very brief notices. Obituaries families had to pay for, so they weren't always very lengthy. The social gossip items, so-and-so came to visit. So-and-so hosted, the bridge club at their home, and they served, scones and tea or whatever.
Oh.
Some of those are just fun to read. Police blotters, legal notices. My grandfather changed his name in 1922 from Brzezinski to Bryce in a Chicago court, which is interesting because one of his daughters also changed her first name at the same time from Elsie to Alice, which I can understand. But again, without that, I would have never known. I would have been always looking for Elsie, and she would not have existed after 1922.
Oh, there's some great things that are available. There's just no doubt about it. Well, is it better to focus on the large newspapers from the big city or go to the small town newspapers?
I like the small towns. My family ancestors all were pretty from small towns. They give you more detail. Small town newspapers were writing for a very, their group of people living there, and they wanted to read about themselves in the newspaper. So they went into more detail. That's where you have more of this, what I call the social gossip about who came to visit and what they were wearing and maybe what they were driving and everything. People they would buy the newspapers if they knew that they or their relatives or even their neighbors were in the newspapers for something. Big cities tended to focus more on state and national news, and the small town newspapers were on the very community level. So they're more fun to read.
They have to have something to fill space.
That's
A
right.
lot of times, that's right. Well, you know, foreign language newspapers, are some of these available on the internet that's already translated?
I don't know that they're already translated on the internet. There's some good translation services. It's called the 19th Century British Library Newspapers, is a good website for foreign newspapers, and that again is available at our Family History Center. Again, it's probably an underused resource. Ancestry.com has newspapers from some of the European countries, but I honestly don't know if they're already translated. I'm guessing they are not translated.
Well, how can we get them translated then?
You know, I think the easiest is if you're fortunate enough to live in a town where there's a college or university, I would probably contact that school to see if they had someone available who could translate. There's a couple internet sources. One, Google has a translation site. It's just simply translate.google.com. And there you can just type in the word or phrase and it'll translate it. They're sort of limited on the languages that they cover though. The one that I've used and I like is called babblefish.yahoo.com, the Tower of Babel. And they have, I think it's 11 or 12 languages, including some of the unusual ones like Portuguese and Chinese. And again, you can type in either your word or phrase, or you can actually have them translate an entire web page. But what I found with the words and phrases is your spelling has to be pretty accurate, which is sometimes hard to do with the penmanship of the old record that you want translated. Yes. But you get a general idea.
Yes.
Or just get a good, say French, English, Spanish, English, whatever dictionary and struggle through on your own.
Okay, well, you mentioned obituaries a while ago. How is it beneficial to the researcher?
Hopefully, even though it's written by a bereaved family member, the facts and the names and spelling are going to be correct. Where the person was born, their date of birth, their parents' names, siblings, children's names. I have an example of an obituary written in 1888 of an ancestor of mine. Again, this is 1888, and it goes into a lot of detail about where she was born, all of her children. It states that I think it's sort of funny. It's one of those that made me chuckle, but I thought, oh, this poor woman. It's titled A Good Woman Gone. And it states how she had suffered a stroke and that they thought she was dead one morning, but then she seemed to rally and then finally died the next morning. And then it gives you an idea about her personality, because it just states that she endeared herself to a large circle of friends and acquaintances who truly and sincerely mourn her death. So an obituary can give you an idea about that person's character and what kind of a life they perhaps led and what kind of an impact they had on their family and their community,
Sure.
in addition to the facts and figures that we're looking for.
Sure. Plus, many times they tell about the profession of the individual,
Right.
the extra humor that they had, or something of this nature.
And even education.
Sure.
They graduated from this college or this university.
Where do people start as far as looking for obituaries?
Well, if you know where the person was living when they died, I would start again with the newspapers. If you're lucky enough to have a month in a year, obviously that can give you a smaller time frame to look in. You could try putting in their name and even just the state in the Find a Grave website, and maybe someone has transcribed that particular cemetery. And again, that would give you a clue about where to start looking. There's obituarydailytimes.com, but for more recent obituaries.
You know, another thing, and it reminds me, our Genealogical Society happened to find someone that had been saving obituaries in shoeboxes.
Oh my.
And so they were able to pull those out. So it might not hurt to contact the local Genealogical Society and see if they have been keeping, anyone's been keeping, or the library.
That's right.
Oh, yes. Well, what if people don't know the date of which they died and where they were buried and so forth?
It's very difficult. If you could try to find a family member, sometimes a family Bible will have things written in it, especially for those times when vital records were not required by states. The Brown County Library in Wisconsin, and I would think other libraries have this too, they have literally a index card file of deaths in that county for the last 50 to 75 years, and tells you, when they died and where they were buried. Libraries and local genealogical societies are good resources, and so is, again, Cindy's List and Ancestry.com.
Sure.
And there's also the Social Security Death Index, even though that's a little bit limited right now for more recent deaths. It can give you, the month and the year at least when they died, and the location where the last Social Security benefit was mailed.
That's right.
And also it tells you too what state they were living in when they first applied for their Social Security number.
Yes.
A lot of them will just say prior to 1951 with the state, but that gives you an idea of where they were living at that point in their lives too.
And by the way, they could get the Social Security papers, what is it, $21 or is it
It's like
going up?
27, yeah.
27 now?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Inflation.
Okay.
It's still worth it though.
Oh yes, it is. It really is. Well, how accurate are the obituaries in newspapers?
It depends on the family member who gave the information. It said that old caveat, speak no ill of the dead. So even if it was maybe the person didn't have a very, extemporous, good life, you're not going to say, well, he was a robber and a thief and we're glad he's gone. Obituaries are written by the family members, really. So it gives you a starting point. Hopefully they will include where they were born, who their parents were, who the surviving sisters and brothers are, the names of their children. I have an example of would be my great-grandfather's obituary from 1937. It states that he died of a heart attack while he was bringing home the cows, which was true, actually. But it has, that his obituary happens to be fairly accurate. It was written by I think it was his oldest son, Julius. Other obituaries are not, again, but it gives you a starting point. It's just one more clue into the puzzle.
Have you found anyone that in your family that has written their own ahead of time? This happens,
Yeah, I know. Not their own. My mom was very ill a couple years ago, and I actually had written her obituary. And my sisters, their comment was, it's so long, and I'm going, I'll pay for it. I said, I'm writing a genealogical obituary, because I went into all these details. But I know a lot of people do it, because then you get an idea of what kind of a person, what their interests were, what
Sure.
maybe clubs or organizations they belonged to, or what causes were dear to their heart.
And some of them can be quite long, take several columns,
yeah.
There's no doubt about it. Should people try to verify what's in that obituary?
It's a good idea. We need to verify all of our information. Just because it's in the newspaper or just because it's even on a vital record doesn't mean it's 100% accurate.
And how do they do it?
Yeah, that you just compare records. Like, say, a death certificate. Some people think, well, that's a vital record. It's probably okay. All the information is accurate. But that's really not always true. It depends who the informant was for that information, and that's normally on the death certificate. If it was a family member, or if it happened to be, I have a couple that they were living in a boarding house, and it was just someone else in the boarding house who gave the information. So there's a lot of unknowns and question marks in that death record.
I've heard of the terms primary versus secondary sources used. What do they mean by that?
Sort of the easiest way is primary is first-hand information, and a secondary source is second-hand information. A birth certificate, because the information is given by the mother, who obviously was there, would be considered a primary source, because she gave obviously the name of the baby, and the doctor filled out the sex and the weight and the height and all that other stuff. Death certificates, though, are sort of a mixed bag. Obviously, the name, age, date of death, time of death, location can be primary. However, some death certificates have on their parents' names, date of birth, place of birth. That's considered secondary, because who knows if the informant was really accurate in that.
Kathy, you commented on the primary and secondary sources and how they're used, but are newspapers considered as a primary source or a secondary source for information for researchers?
Newspaper people would probably like themselves to be considered primary, but they're actually secondary because it's pretty much secondhand information unless they were literally there. Most of what information a newspaper prints is given to them from someone else, so that makes it secondhand information. One of the examples that I have is the newspaper article about the death of my great-grandfather. He was the one that was found, supposedly died of a heart attack by the stream bringing home the cows. The newspaper article states that they misspelled his last name and there's many misspellings there and just some misinformation. It's literally a secondary source, but again, place to start.
We've heard of him. It's important to list sources of all newspaper articles and obituaries for your ancestors, and right on the back of the pictures and things of this nature. But why is this important, and why should it be done?
It's important so that if we ever want to, or our descendants ever want to go back and look at the record that we found, they know where to look. They don't have to spend hours and months maybe trying to find, okay, where did she find that obituary? What newspaper? And it also verifies, it brings the validity of it that, okay, we found this in the Denver Post on October 1st of 1937 on page B7. Anybody else in the future can find it then.
Okay, good point. Well, Kathy, you know that it's that time in our session that I always ask our guests, what have you done in the way of research that involve newspapers? Have you got a story?
I do. In fact, the information I found in my research was totally different than what I thought I would find. My father was the youngest of 6 children. He had 5 older sisters. And when he was about 13 or 14, his oldest sister died. And as we were children growing up, my dad told us that his sister had died in childbirth. He was living in Wisconsin and she was living in Illinois at the time. And I thought, okay, never met her, never would. This was like in about 1930, 1931. So as I'm starting my own genealogy, I thought, well, I could possibly have a first cousin out there somewhere. I'm going to see if this infant survived and what happened, because I know the father remarried several years later. So I contacted a volunteer researcher from the local genealogy society. It was a small, Illinois town. And I was looking for her obituary because I thought, well, it would mention, either died in childbirth or that survived by her husband and this male or female child. Well, the researcher emailed me back and said, this is what I found. She did not die in childbirth. She died by suicide. He had found the obituary, which led him to a front page newspaper article in this small town paper stating that, how she died and how her husband found her and the whole story. And I'm going, oh, and he said there was no mention made of a child at all. So I'm guessing that was just something that my father was told because of his rather young age. And perhaps he never knew the truth about his older sister, or if he did, he never shared that with us. So it was just sort of a sad end to her life, really.
And it was also a piece of luck on your part to find that bit of information.
Right.
So digging just a little more.
Yeah.
In other areas, and it's always good to do that.
And again, using volunteer researchers who are wonderful. They're very helpful. Some of them do charge a little bit for time and copies, especially if it's because sometimes the research takes several hours. Like I know this particular person, it probably took him some time to track it all down.
You bring up something, and we've talked about this earlier. How do we find some researchers now to look for obituaries or things of this nature? You got some suggestions?
What I do is either, again, the library, because a lot of librarians will do, limited research for you. If you give them, they're not going to say, well, give me, all the information you have about the Jacques family. That's too broad. But if it's, can you look for the obituaries on these dates? They will do that. And again, the local genealogical societies or historical societies, most of them will do research if you give them enough information to start with. And there might be, like I said, there might be some charges. Some do it totally gratis, but they would definitely appreciate a donation to their society then.
Sure.
Oh, another way to find volunteer researchers is a website called USGenWeb. And you can click down to the state, and then you can fine-tune it to the county. And they also have some volunteer researchers. Just make sure that you follow rather the whatever the research limits are that person has put on it. And I also want to mention, you brought up Ancestry.com. For those who, for whatever reason, don't have their own subscription, most libraries and the family history centers have what they call the Ancestry Library Edition available at no charge. You have to go to the library or the family history center to access that database, but it's there. But one of the caveats is that that particular library edition does not include historical newspapers, but it has pretty much everything else, so it's still a great resource.
You know, there's one other thing too I think that we need to consider is making contacts with your oldest relatives or any of them, because many of them, if something that happened of great importance to the family, they would put it in the cedar chest and store that thing. And so there's a lot of stored newspapers out there with information on them. Kathy, I see we're out of time. Thanks so much for being with us again. We appreciate it. We have several educational events coming this month at our society. Our general meetings meet the third Thursday of each month except December. And our monthly programs feature an experienced genealogy speaker who presents a different subject on genealogy or family history research. The Family Tree Maker Users Group meets during the first or second week of each month, except during the summer, to teach about genealogy software. Please visit our society website at www.lcgsco.org or our Facebook page for a schedule of our events. If you're interested in purchasing a DVD of our Genealogy Quest programs, please visit our website for details. And by the way, they make a good gift for your relatives or your local genealogy society. Be sure to look at this month's edition of 50 Plus Marketplace News. Our society writes a genealogy column every month with some great information on genealogy and family history research. It is always available at your libraries and senior centers in Larimer County. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you again next month. Have a nice week, everyone.